the Rust King's army. An intelligent super mutant built an empire in Ohio by offering wasteland raiders a simple choice: join him or die. The Rust King started by launching smaller attacks on settlements like Highway Town, destroying them and forcing survivors to rebuild, then destroying them again until they were weak enough to absorb. Eventually, he invited residents to join him with one rule: only the strongest survive. Parents and children killed each other in battle for the chance to join his army, and those who refused became the first casualties. The army seized the Rust Kingdom, an old Abraxadine chemical plant that had been a Deathclaw nest. The Rust King personally led the assault, allegedly beheaded the Deathclaw matriarch with his bare hands, and adopted the eggs left behind. This gave the army their signature edge: trained combat Deathclaws raised at Jackson Junkyard and deployed as armored shock troops that most wasteland factions simply cannot counter. Their conquest has been methodical. They besieged Fort Steuben overnight and stormed it at dawn, sending survivors to the Rust Kingdom's arena where captives fight Deathclaws to prove their worth or die as entertainment. They absorbed the Ash Cavers when their dying leader voluntarily folded his group into the Rust King's ranks, and fortified Checkpoint Canyon to repel cultist incursions. What separates this from a typical raider gang is the Rust King's strategic thinking. He recruits specialists, animal trainers for the Deathclaws, and skilled fighters. By 2105, the Rust King's army enjoys near-complete dominance over Burning Springs, essentially creating a raider state controlled through overwhelming force and strategic brutality. The Children of Atom. This faction is a religious movement that worships radiation itself. And no, that's not an exaggeration. These people genuinely believe that nuclear weapons are divine instruments of creation, and the Great War was actually a blessed event that birthed countless new universes. Their whole philosophy centers on something called division, the idea that when an atom splits, it releases entire worlds trapped inside. But their ideals make it a problem for everyone else because some members actually possess natural immunity to radiation, which allows them to actively spread it. They contaminate water supplies, and some even force settlements into accepting their faith or dying of radiation poisoning. In Far Harbor, they're working to expand radioactive fog across the entire island, which would make it uninhabitable for anyone except them. They also occupy places like the Glowing Sea and other irradiated zones as bases to launch attacks and store weapons that other factions can't reach without dying. But the faction's most dangerous branch operates out of the nucleus, a former nuclear submarine base in Far Harbor that they've turned into a military stronghold. In there, they've got pre-war combat armor, military-grade weapons, and zealots who are former mercenaries fighting with religious conviction. They control nuclear stockpiles and defend them with lethal force, giving them access to the wasteland's most destructive weapons. They've also reprogrammed military robots to serve their cause and launched coordinated campaigns under leaders like High Confessor Tectus. The Minutemen. What happens when you have a group of ordinary sellers who've had enough? Well, they grab whatever guns they have, form volunteer squads, and decide to actually help each other instead of waiting for someone else to save them. That's exactly what the Commonwealth Minutemen did, and that simple idea turned them into the closest thing Massachusetts has to a functional military. Based on the Revolutionary War-era Minutemen, they operate on one promise: if you call for help, they'll show up ready to fight, and they proved that wasn't just talk when they defended Diamond City against a super mutant attack back in 2180. That victory put them on the map, and at their peak, they operated out of the Castle, a fortified position with heavy artillery and a radio transmitter linking scattered groups across the Commonwealth. Now, this wasn't just so they could chat. That transmitter let them coordinate artillery strikes to support troops in the field, turning their scattered volunteers into a coordinated fighting force. But here's what really makes them dangerous. Their strength comes from grassroots support. Every allied settlement contributes volunteers who get trained and equipped by a core group of full-time soldiers, which means their numbers can explode when they need reinforcements. They use flare guns to signal for backup, and any nearby Minutemen are expected to drop what they're doing and respond immediately. Their signature weapon is the laser musket, a hand-cranked energy weapon that symbolizes their blend of old-world values and wasteland ingenuity, but they're not limited to small arms. But here's the thing that really sets them apart: their resilience. After near collapse from internal conflicts and the Quincy Massacre, the Minutemen can be rebuilt by the sole survivor from basically nothing into a force capable of destroying the Institute. They're one of the few factions that can mobilize vertibirds and launch full-scale assaults on fortified positions, which is impressive for what started as farmers with hunting rifles. Even after being nearly wiped out, they can rebuild from a single settlement into a Commonwealth-wide network in a matter of months, and that kind of adaptability makes them genuinely formidable. The Shi. A Chinese submarine crew survived the Great War beached in San Francisco and built one of the most technologically advanced societies in the wasteland. They salvaged their submarine the Shi Huangti piece by piece to construct the Steel Palace, which became their headquarters made from the vessel's metal hull. But their technological prowess doesn't stop there. They've also manufactured high-tech weapons for trade and equipped their forces with cutting-edge gear that most factions can only scavenge. They're one of the few groups capable of restoring pre-war T-51 power armor to full working condition. And so while the Brotherhood of Steel hoards technology, the Shi actually produces it. They're also actively doing research to develop new advancements in nuclear power, space travel, and synthetic fuel from plant extracts. Now, their military units called the Shi Guard are small, but when your soldiers carry technology that makes them worth 10 regular troops each, the numbers matter less. The Shi has also done a lot of good, including developing radiation-consuming plant life that cleaned up San Francisco after the Enclave was destroyed. Despite this, they operate independently from wasteland politics, so they're not stretched thin controlling territory or managing alliances. Superior firepower and technology make attacking them too costly for anyone to seriously consider. Talon Company. Someone is paying mercenaries to keep the capital wasteland in chaos, and Talon Company is more than happy to take the job. They're not your typical guns for hire. This is a militarized organization with a clear chain of command, fortified positions throughout DC, and absolutely no moral restrictions on their targets. What makes them particularly dangerous is their employer's specific mandate: hunt down anyone trying to bring order to the wasteland and kill them before they can make a difference. They operate out of Fort Bannister, a heavily reinforced bunker complex where their commander, Jabsco, coordinates operations across the capital wasteland. If it wasn't clear from their flag, the Talon Company is brutal. Between 2275 and 2276, they slaughtered an entire settlement, women, children, everyone, just because the contract called for it. They're willing to attack anyone for the right price, and the right price is apparently whatever their mysterious benefactor is paying. Talon Company mercs are equipped with combat armor, Chinese assault rifles, and laser rifles. They also deploy military robots, including reprogrammed sentry bots, to guard their strategic outposts. Their tactics are straightforward but effective. They operate in fire teams of 3, using combined arms and squad tactics that most raider groups can't match. They control artillery positions at Seward Square and Tacoma Park, giving them indirect fire support capabilities. They've successfully held positions against super mutant assaults in downtown DC, which says something about their combat effectiveness. If you gain positive karma in the capital wasteland, they'll actively hunt you with coordinated ambushes at metro stations and key travel points. They're essentially a private army working to ensure the wasteland stays broken. Followers of the Apocalypse. Founded by the spiritual leader Nicole, the Followers of the Apocalypse became one of the most respected humanitarian organizations in New California. But don't mistake humanitarian for harmless. They're strategically positioned as the wasteland's primary source of education and medical expertise, which gives them influence that rivals military factions. They established the Angels Boneyard Medical University, the post-war world's first full-fledged educational institution. This isn't just some makeshift classroom cobbled together from scraps. It's a legitimate university offering in-depth courses on medicine, agriculture, and technology to anyone willing to learn, completely nonprofit. Follower doctors also train at standardized facilities to ensure consistent expertise across all their operations. They've got access to autodocs and can perform advanced surgeries, but they don't just focus on keeping people alive. Their research programs extend into areas that actually rebuild civilization. They study tribal linguistics and anthropology, create radiation-resistant plant life, and work on alternative energy solutions like solar power. Their lack of territorial ambitions means they rarely make enemies, but their knowledge makes them invaluable allies. Even the NCR, despite breaking official ties, still relies on follower-trained personnel and expertise. They're soft power incarnate. No army, no government, but everyone needs what they're offering. The Railroad. Operating from beneath Boston's Old North Church, the Railroad runs a shadow war against the Institute with one goal: liberating synthetic humans from slavery. They're not a large organization, but they've survived repeated Institute raids through paranoid operational security and a cellular structure where each level knows progressively less. Tourists and informants at the bottom know almost nothing, while only HQ members have access to complete intelligence. Capture one cell, and the rest of the network stays intact. Their technological edge comes from Tinker Tom, a genius engineer who designed custom weapons like the Deliverer pistol and the Tinker Tom Special, developed military-grade armored coats, and created surveillance devices that feed constant intelligence back to headquarters. But their most valuable asset is PAM, a predictive analytic machine that processes field data and predicts courser movements, Institute operations, and optimal strike windows. They've also got inside help from an Institute scientist codenamed Patriot, who's been feeding them information since 2283, though he doesn't even know the Railroad exists. Their agents are highly trained infiltrators who maintain a network of safe houses across the Commonwealth, each equipped with dead drops and marked with rail signs, chalk markings visible only to trained observers. Meanwhile, their heavies are frontline soldiers equipped with Gauss rifles and railway rifles, capable of holding their ground against Institute coursers in direct combat. What makes them genuinely formidable is that the Institute, with all its technology and resources, hasn't been able to destroy them. They've lost headquarters before, but they always rebuild, adapt, and continue operations. The Boomers. Imagine a tribe so obsessed with explosives that they use artillery to keep the entire wasteland at bay. That's the Boomers, and they occupy Nellis Air Force Base, where they'll shell anyone who comes within a mile of their territory with howitzer fire. They emerged from Vault 34, one of the most heavily armed vaults in existence. When the Overseer tried to seal the armory, they rioted, seized the heavy weapons, and fought their way to the surface with a kill ratio of 43.6 hostiles per 1 Boomer casualty. They found Nellis Air Force Base, a nuclear-bombed, irradiated facility that everyone else avoided, assessed the radiation levels with Geiger counters, and moved in anyway. After restoring the facility to working order, they retrieved functional howitzers from Area 2 and installed them as a defensive perimeter that can saturate approach routes with high explosive shells before enemies even see the base. They're completely self-sufficient with solar power, thriving farms, and water drawn directly from Lake Mead. When the NCR tried cutting off their water supply, the Boomers shelled sections of the NCR's pipeline until the flow was restored. They manufacture massive quantities of ammunition using advanced tools like welding torches and plasma cutters, and they've stockpiled enough missiles to last 5 years. But their greatest asset is the B-29 bomber they recovered from Lake Mead. They've been training pilots in virtual reality flight simulators for years, and once operational, the bomber gives them air superiority that no other faction in the Mojave can match. And that's part 2 of Fallout's most powerful factions. Did I miss any? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Fallout lore dives.